The source that I have is impeccable, and he said that not only were the cameras smashed, plural cameras smashed, so that the suspect likely knew about the locations of them, but that the car belonging to the sister of Savannah Guthrie, Annie Guthrie, was towed, impounded, and taken into evidence. And that, and this is the wording, it's very important. The wording is very important. He said they now believe the son-in-law may be the prime suspect. Those are the words. Son-in-law may be the prime suspect at this point.
66 days have passed, yet one specific vehicle remains in law enforcement custody at a local Tucson mechanic shop for forensic reassembly. A reporter observed the car being painstakingly rebuilt, while experts noted the necessity of building an airtight case before filing any formal charges. A veteran SWAT commander explains that investigators must leave zero room for doubt when presenting a complex case to a potential criminal jury. Maintaining a strict chain of custody on key items is the only way to ensure the evidence holds up under intense legal scrutiny. If no incriminating evidence was found inside the car, its continued detention by the state remains a massive and unexplained legal contradiction. If biological evidence was recovered, the lack of an arrest suggests a calculated tactical delay or a third, more complex investigative possibility. Federal investigators have publicly highlighted 3 specific dates on the calendar that suggest a pattern of predatory behavior the public has not connected. These 3 flag dates act as pillars for the federal theory, yet their significance remains buried within the classified files of the investigation. This case contains psychological layers that suggest the perpetrator moved through the residence with a terrifying level of comfort and predatory familiarity. The investigation has moved into areas of the Guthrie family history that most would find far too disturbing to address in public. The timeline of January 31st offers a surgical look at the final movements of a woman whose life was about to be erased. The clock starts at 5:32 in the afternoon, when 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, a woman of sharp intellect, prepared for dinner. Nancy was a long-term resident of the Catalina foothills who took an Uber to her daughter Annie's residence for a standard Sunday meal. It was a brief 10-minute drive between two households that had remained incredibly close and connected over the many years of residency. What occurred inside that home that evening was entirely ordinary, a family meal followed by card games and typical Sunday night conversation. It was the kind of unremarkable night that only feels significant in hindsight, after everything that followed turned it into a final record. No one sitting at that table had any reason to suspect they were being watched or that the week would end in violence. Sunday plans were already made for church, with the expectation that Nancy would wake up in the safety of her own home. At 9:48 p.m., Nancy was dropped at her residence by her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni, in a blue Honda CRV SUV. That vehicle was registered to Annie and Tommaso, and it sat in Nancy's driveway during a critical 2-minute window of missing time. Ring camera footage and digital logs from the garage door confirm that Nancy was physically on her property until 9:50 p.m. At exactly 9:50 p.m., the garage door closed and Tommaso's car drove away, leaving Nancy alone inside the dark Tucson house. The 4 hours that followed represent the black hole of missing information that remains the unanswered center of this entire criminal case. On the morning of February 1st, when Nancy failed to meet a friend for church, the missing persons report was officially filed. Law enforcement moved across multiple threads, securing the property and involving the FBI to search for signs of a forced entry. Within those first few days of the search, detectives focused their energy on 2 specific vehicles, taking both into their forensic custody. Nancy's personal car was seized from her garage on February 6th to establish her physical timeline for the days preceding her disappearance. By the middle of March, that vehicle was processed and cleared for return to the surviving members of the Guthrie family. The second vehicle, the blue Honda CRV driven by Tommaso Cioni that night, was treated with far more intense forensic scrutiny. That Honda went into the evidence locker almost immediately and has not been seen by the family since the night Nancy vanished. On day 66, the Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed the vehicle was still being held for further biological and physical testing. The fact that one car was returned while the other remains impounded reveals the specific forensic focus of the lead detectives. Investigators are signaling that this specific car contains evidence that is too significant to release back into the hands of the family. The blue Honda CRV is no longer just a vehicle, it is a mobile crime scene being dissected by the Pima County authorities. Keeping the car past the point of basic inspection suggests they are performing a deep, microscopic search for traces of Nancy's presence. On March 10th, reporter Dave Mack provided the first detailed look at what was happening to that car behind closed police doors. Mack revealed that the vehicle was being held at an auto shop in Tucson under the sheriff's direct and absolute legal supervision. The Honda was not being repaired for the family, it was being held as a critical piece of state evidence for trial. According to Mack, the vehicle was being reassembled after a scorched earth forensic search that left no interior surface or panel unexamined. The Pima County Sheriff's Office has officially dispatched investigators. The vehicle was moved to a mechanical facility with the explicit purpose of being restored to its original state, exactly as it was when it was first taken from Nancy Guthrie. The goal was its return to the family. Focus on those specific words. Put back together. Reassembly is the final act of a forensic autopsy. When technicians perform an examination of this caliber, they do not just look inside, they tear it down. They strip the interior panels, they rip out the door linings and the trunk floor, they probe the entire undercarriage. Every flat surface is swabbed for biological traces. Every dark cavity is inspected. Putting it back together is the terminal phase of that hunt. It is the cleanup that follows a completed search, not a part of the search itself. When Mack used that phrasing on March 10th, he was describing a forensic timeline that had already reached its end. The invasive physical scrutiny of that vehicle was over, or nearly so. Yet the car stayed in police custody. There is a documented mechanical failure that explains a portion of this delay, and we will state it plainly. This investigation does not ignore facts to fit a narrative. Reporter Brian Enton confirmed that the forensic process actually damaged the vehicle. During the high-level data extraction, a technical fault was triggered in the CRV onboard electronics. The car was effectively wounded by the search. This necessitated additional labor at a repair shop that had nothing to do with the search for evidence. It was specialized electronic work. These repairs had to be finished before the family could take possession. A significant portion of that 66-day window was a mechanic fixing a glitch that the investigators themselves created. That is the logical, mundane reality of the situation, and it is a piece of the puzzle. But stopping there is a mistake. When the Pima County Sheriff Department was asked about the timeline, they claimed the process was ongoing. They gave no date. Here is the problem. A mechanical repair has a definitive endpoint. A criminal investigation is a different beast entirely. The language used by law enforcement has consistently pointed to something far deeper than a simple garage bay fix. Consider the source. Bob Krieger is a former commander of the Pima County Sheriff Department SWAT team. He knows the internal politics and the departmental culture. He understands exactly how these high-stakes decisions are made. When journalists asked him why the CRV was still impounded, his answer was unsettlingly precise. He stated that an investigator's sole purpose is to build a case that is absolutely bulletproof, a case that leaves no room for a jury's doubt. Maintaining a rigid chain of custody on vital evidence is the foundation of that strategy. He also pointed out a hard truth of the system. Any vehicle seized in connection with an active investigation can be held in a state locker until the case reaches its final legal conclusion. Look at those two statements side by side. This is not just a delay caused by a slow mechanic or red tape. This is prosecutorial intent. A former commander is describing a strategy for a courtroom. They are handling this car as if it is the most important witness in the trial. They are ensuring that whatever it contains or whatever it proves cannot be challenged by a defense attorney before a jury hears the truth. The real question is no longer why the car is still sitting in a lot. The question is whose case is being built and who is the target. Most people focus on the physical when they think of a car search. They imagine fingerprints on the glass or DNA on the seats. They look for signs of a struggle or blood in the carpet. All of that is critical, and the crime lab has likely harvested every single hair. But there is a silent digital layer within that blue Honda CRV that has been largely ignored by the mainstream media. Krieger identified it. He noted the wealth of electronic evidence hidden within the sensors and computers of a modern machine. These cars never stop watching. He explained that every data point, from the car's location to its speed and the exact time of day, can be cross-referenced and mapped out. That single fact is far more dangerous than a stray fingerprint. A fingerprint only proves someone was there. Digital data proves a life. It tells the story of everywhere that vehicle traveled, when it arrived, how fast it was moving, and exactly how long it remained still. This Honda CRV is not just a piece of metal, it is a sophisticated data logging device. It has been writing a diary since it was last driven. Here is what that digital record actually holds, and why it is the death knell for this case. Modern Hondas carry an event data recorder. The EDR operates with a cold, mechanical independence. The driver does not turn it on. The driver cannot turn it off. It is always listening. It logs precise GPS coordinates. It maps the exact route taken, every turn made, every stop, and the duration of every moment of silence. If that car stopped anywhere between 9:50 p.m. on January 31st and the following dawn, that stop is now a permanent record. It holds the address, it holds the duration, it holds the timestamp, it tracks velocity at every single interval of the journey. It records every instance of hard braking, every sudden burst of acceleration, and the entire speed profile of the trip. It is a confession. Investigators do not need to guess where the car went or what the driver was doing. The car reconstructed the entire event in real time. Every second is logged. Every movement is preserved in the vehicle's non-volatile memory. It even tracks the ignition events themselves. Every time that engine was sparked to life, a digital timestamp was created. Every time a door was opened, a sensor recorded the event. This data creates a shadow of the driver. It follows them through the desert, into the suburbs, and straight to wherever they were going. The investigators are not looking at a car anymore. They are looking at a digital map of a crime, a map that cannot be erased or lied to. Every engine start is a heartbeat, every brake press is a moment of panic, and all of it is waiting for a jury to see it. The system logs every ignition cycle, engine shutdown, door movement, and the exact second a seatbelt clicked home. Each isolated event the vehicle archives is burned into memory with a cold, machine-generated timestamp indifferent to human memory. This data remains immune to psychological stress and cannot be manipulated without leaving a permanent, detectable digital footprint. Outside of the standard recorder, this generation of Honda models also archives every infotainment interaction and mobile device handshake. The log captures Bluetooth pings, background application syncs, and navigation queries, provided a smartphone was tethered to the car. Every entered coordinate and followed route leaves a breadcrumb trail that investigator Krigbaum verified has been secured for analysis. He confirmed the processing of these files, emphasizing their status as evidence requiring an absolute, unbroken chain of custodial integrity. This preservation must last until the final verdict. Now, refocus that forensic scrutiny onto the specific, critical time frame of interest. The Pima County Sheriff Department has established a precise chronological sequence for the early hours of February 1st, 2026. Multiple news agencies and official briefings have cross-validated this timeline. These are not approximations or guesses based on witnesses. These are hard device logs. At exactly 1:47 a.m. on Sunday morning, the doorbell camera at Nancy Guthrie's residence disconnected. By 2:12 a.m., security software flagged a person on the property, a detection that registered instantly within the system backend. This occurred despite the lack of a paid subscription for live video, leaving a latent data packet for FBI technicians to exhume. At 2:28 a.m., the application monitoring Nancy Guthrie's implanted pacemaker logged a definitive loss of connection with her phone. These markers 147, 212, and 228 create the narrow parameters that detectives believe encapsulate the entire night. The fate of Nancy Guthrie was decided within those 41 minutes, a window where every single second carried life-altering weight. This leads to the central forensic interrogation the CRV data must resolve. Where was that vehicle between 9:50 p.m., when it pulled away from the property, and 2:28 a.m., when the pacemaker connection ended? Was it in motion? Was it parked at the residence of Tommaso and Annie 10 minutes away? Did the tires rotate for a single mile? Did the ignition engage? Was a cabin door unlatched? The vehicle's internal circuitry holds the definitive answer to every haunting question. Unlike a human observer, silicon and wire cannot be intimidated by cross-examination. It cannot suffer memory lapses or buckle under pressure. It provides a binary reality. The car was present or it was not. That truth is currently locked within the data. Someone inside this investigation has already reviewed these logs. There is a layer to this story that has never been exposed. A global audience remains hyper-focused, their presence marking an invisible grid spanning across every sovereign border. This inquiry has paralyzed the national attention, drawing thousands from isolated rural outposts and sprawling urban centers. Every coordinate represents another silent witness, their collective gaze fixed on the mounting forensic evidence. A pervasive assumption has dictated the narrative of almost every report produced regarding that specific blue Honda CRV. From the moment the vehicle was impounded, this core premise has been accepted without being explicitly named or challenged on camera. The prevailing theory is simple. The CRV is being held because it contains forensic evidence that incriminates the driver. This interpretation has ignited rampant speculation and fueled digital theories that kept Tommaso Cioni in the crosshairs of public scrutiny. This is a man the Pima County Sheriff Department officially cleared on February 16, 2026. The internet refused to let the exoneration land, yet a diametrically opposite interpretation of these same facts exists. It is a perspective that has been overlooked, one that fundamentally alters the entire premise of what that vehicle represents. What if the telemetry from that blue Honda CRV does not condemn the man behind the wheel? What if it clears him? Imagine if GPS logs prove the vehicle never returned to the Nancy Guthrie neighborhood after the 9:50 p.m. departure. Consider the possibility that the data shows the car remained stationary at the Tommaso and Annie residence within minutes of leaving. If the ignition remained cold until daybreak, then the sudden clearance of the family by investigators is logically consistent. In that scenario, the CRV is not evidence against Cioni. It is an impenetrable alibi, documented, time-stamped, and machine-generated. This represents the most resilient form of alibi modern forensics can produce. While a human witness can be coerced into lying, a neighbor's memory can shift or be manipulated. Any alibi built on human testimony is inherently fragile and vulnerable to attack. But a vehicle GPS log, captured in real time and extracted by forensic professionals, remains an absolute, unyielding truth. This belongs to an entirely different class of evidence. It is a digital wall that no prosecutor can dismantle on the stand. In the reality of a courtroom, reasonable doubt is not just a legal standard, it is a tactical target for defense. Attorneys are not required to prove innocence. They only need to manufacture uncertainty, which is simple when dealing with human variables. Humans are fallible, but this machine-generated archive is different. It is a silent witness that could stop the prosecution entirely. Investigators often build their architecture around the final name etched into the victim's history. They hunt for the intersection of physical proximity and logistical opportunity, but objective proof can shatter that profile. A satellite-synced record showing a vehicle sat idle 10 minutes away throughout the murder window provides an absolute alibi for Tommaso Cioni. That digital footprint creates a surgical extraction of his name from the suspect pool, leaving no room for a prosecutor's narrative. Logic dictates that where there is no physical presence, there is no crime. Sheriff Chris Nano subsequently exonerated every Guthrie sibling and spouse. On February 16, 2026, the sheriff went on the record, explicitly naming the entire Guthrie bloodline and their partners as cleared. He confirmed they were no longer under the microscope, noting that their cooperation had been clinical and gracious despite the circumstances. They were rebranded from suspects to victims just 16 days into the hunt, a remarkably aggressive timeline for such a brutal case. The public hasn't asked the critical question: what specific, undeniable data forced the state to fold its hands so early? While polygraphs and voluntary interviews played their part, it was the forensic extraction of the CRV car data that changed the game. By the time the clearance hit the wires, that data had been stripped and analyzed, the most rigid, unyielding proof in the entire file. If the GPS pings confirmed Tommaso's vehicle remained stationary and 10 minutes from Nancy's residence, the debate ends there. From 9:50 p.m. until the sunrise of February 1st, that data doesn't just suggest innocence, it mathematically mandates it. It is a hard fact that bypasses human intuition, yet there is a secondary layer to this data that is far more haunting. Jennifer Coffindaffer, a veteran of the FBI's psychological and investigative wars, has tracked these developments with clinical precision. She argues that searching the innocent isn't about finding guilt, but about isolating the specific void where the killer must exist. It is the science of exclusion. A vehicle's data proving where a person was not is often more valuable than where they were. This creates a dark negative space on the map. If that CRV stayed clear of Nancy's street during those fatal hours, the map changes. With that GPS precision acting as a filter, every other engine block that hummed through that neighborhood suddenly begins to glow under scrutiny. The CRV functions as a tactical perimeter, allowing investigators to draw a line in the dirt and look elsewhere for the predator. By defining what the killer is not, they sharpen their focus on the specific monster that remains. Professional investigators treat cleared evidence as a fixed anchor, using it to stabilize a chaotic and shifting crime scene. The vehicle, currently sitting in the sterile silence of a Pima County impound lot, serves as the investigation's most vital landmark. It represents the hard edge of the search, a physical manifestation of the territory where the killer did not tread. This boundary is tightening around the actual target, and Coffindaffer's psychological breakdown of the car's seizure reveals a hidden desperation. It points directly to the state of the evidence and the tactical mindset of the detectives when they first moved on that vehicle. The CRV wasn't seized by force, there was no warrant, only a polite request and a family that had nothing to hide. In the world of criminal investigation, that distinction isn't a formality, it is a loud, ringing signal of intent. Coffindaffer pointed out the obvious. The police lacked the probable cause required to compel a seizure, so they relied on voluntary access. Her logic is cold and professional. If an agent has the evidence to take what they want, they don't ask for permission. It is a subtext. Every federal agent recognizes the moment you have the goods, the pleasantries end and the legal machinery takes over. You don't knock on a front door and wait for a yes when you have enough to convince a judge to sign a warrant. The choice to seek consent over a warrant is a permanent record of how thin the ice was beneath the investigators' feet. They had suspicion, a psychological itch, but they lacked the constitutional weight to force their way into the Guthrie family's lives. The family opened the doors, the data was taken, and the results have been swallowed by the dark vault of the ongoing case. The sheriff's department has maintained total radio silence on what those digital pings actually revealed, or what they failed to find. According to the Krieger framework of evidentiary control, that data is now a weapon being held in reserve for a future trial. But 3 dates have emerged as the focus of a federal obsession: January 11th, January 24th, and January 31st. These aren't random points on a calendar. They are the specific windows where the FBI believes the predator was most active. These dates were burning holes in the Pima County Sheriff's files weeks before Nancy Guthrie's life was violently extinguished. The evidence for these dates arrived through 2 distinct high-tech channels, elevating them from mere theory to forensic certainty. January 11th was flagged by a primary digital witness, a fact Sheriff Chris Nanos was forced to admit during a restricted briefing. The witness wasn't human, it was Google, providing the raw telemetry from the Nest doorbell camera that watched Nancy's porch. That lens, fixed eternally on the front door, captured the first tremors of the violence that was about to unfold. Google's doorbell telemetry provided the first objective glimpse of a predatory presence lurking at the threshold of the Guthrie home. January 11th was flagged by investigators after Google back-end systems indicated the security camera likely captured specific footage on that Saturday. This reveals that detectives weren't operating on a hunch, they were following a digital footprint that pointed directly to a precise moment. 21 days before the kidnapping, a figure may have appeared near Nancy Guthrie's front door, triggering the device's internal recording system. The Guthrie family later confirmed the significance of January 11th in a public statement released on Instagram on March 22nd. They pleaded with Tucson residents to review their memories and any home security recordings from January 31st, February 1st, and January 11th. In their own words, a community member might hold a piece of information that seems insignificant to them but is actually vital. January 24th surfaced through a different channel. On March 16th, News Nation reporter Brian Enton revealed that the FB I was asking about that Saturday. Neighbors told Enton that agents were zeroing in on surveillance from January 24th, marking a clear escalation in the federal probe. Enton verified the reports directly. In addition to the Google flagged date, a neighbor confirmed the FBI's intense interest in January 24th. That date sits exactly 8 days before Guthrie vanished. It was the final Saturday before she was taken from her own home. Federal agents were scouring the neighborhood for footage from both dates, suggesting a calculated pattern was emerging in their secret files. These two dates, arrived at through separate investigative channels weeks apart, drive toward a singular and deeply unsettling conclusion. Whatever happened on January 31st was not an isolated event. The predator's window of interest opened at least 3 weeks prior. Look at the pattern connecting January 11th, January 24th, and January 31st. Every single one of those dates falls on a weekend. All three fall within the 5-week span leading to Nancy's disappearance, suggesting a methodical psychological countdown to the actual crime. The fixation on footage from those first two dates reveals a hard truth. January 31st was not the start, it was the finish. January 11th was the date pulled from Google's own internal data, a digital ghost recorded long before the actual tragedy occurred. The possibility remains that the masked figure standing on Nancy's porch on February 1st was the same shadow seen on January 11th. That presence near her property nearly 3 weeks before the abduction suggests a level of obsession that has never been fully scrutinized. Consider the structural implications of this timeline. If an individual was prowling that property on January 11th and again on January 24th, they weren't just wandering through a Tucson neighborhood, they were returning with intent, refining their plan under the cover of night. Returning implies a focused purpose. Returning to the same doorstep across multiple Saturdays suggests a clinical study of the victim's environment. In the world of violent crime, that kind of study is called pre-operational surveillance, a cold, calculated preparation for an eventual attack. This was no impulsive act. This wasn't a random crime of opportunity that just happened to occur on a Saturday after a meal. The pre-crime window 3 weekends of documented presence paints a picture of a predator who prioritized reconnaissance over immediate action. Google's data flagging that specific Saturday describes an individual who invested weeks of time before finally committing to the abduction. A ghost who watched from the shadows before making a move. Now imagine what that surveillance revealed about the Guthrie household. They would have observed that on certain Saturdays, the home is bustling with relatives, filled with the warmth of a family gathering. They saw the cars in the driveway, noted the lights staying on late, and identified the exact moment the family began to disperse. They knew the last car to leave before the garage door shut and the house went dark belonged to the person driving Nancy home. On January 11th and 24th, that car drove away. On January 31st, it left at 9:50 p.m., leaving Nancy alone. Picture January 31st. From a vantage point in the darkness outside, the blue Honda CRV sits parked in the driveway. Warm light spills from the windows. Inside, a family is finishing dinner, oblivious to the eyes, watching them from the perimeter. At 9:48 p.m., the garage door rolls up. Tommaso pulls inside to drop Nancy off, a routine they had mastered. 2 minutes later, the car backs out, the garage closes, and the red glow of the taillights fades into the distance. To an observer who had witnessed this same sequence on previous Saturdays, that disappearing car was a green light. The family was gone. The house was locked. Nancy Guthrie was finally isolated. But there is a deeper layer to this timing. This requires analytical precision rather than mere assertion. We must look at the psychological mechanics of the night she disappeared. The final verifiable human contact in the official record is Tommaso Cioni, his car, his GPS, his 2 minutes in that garage. If Nancy were to vanish seconds after he pulled away, the immediate trajectory of the investigation would inevitably point toward him. In the absence of other documented witnesses, the last person to see her alive becomes the primary focus for every detective. This is not a theory about his involvement. It is a structural reality of how homicide and abduction investigations are built. The final person documented at the scene is always the first to be dismantled. It is a matter of sequence, not evidence. Now, ask the most unsettling question of all. Did the perpetrator understand this dynamic long before January 31st arrived? Is it possible they specifically chose the night when the person closest to her would be the only one left in the frame? Nancy's family being present was no oversight. It was a cold, tactical calculation by a predator seeking a specific outcome. This was not a scheduling fluke, but a dark awareness of the digital trail that would remain after the act. A stalker who spent Saturdays monitoring that property would have mapped every domestic rhythm and predictable pattern. They knew a family visit ends with a car leaving, a final goodbye, and a definitive electronic timestamp. A name becomes tied to the last contact, ensuring the initial police pressure crushes the innocent while the guilty vanish. While investigators focused on the family, the killer slipped away. This is cold logic, not mere speculation. Tommaso Cioni was publicly cleared on February 16, 2026, with no room for doubt. This clearance forces a darker inquiry into the individual who has avoided the forensic light of this investigation. Did the killer select January 31st specifically because Tommaso's presence would create a convenient, muddy record? Was that night chosen because his proximity guaranteed the aftermath would be mired in domestic complexity? If so, the blue Honda CRV at that Pima County shop is more than just a vehicle. It is not mere evidence of a night, but proof of a mind that plans before it strikes. It reveals the clinical nature of a predator who studies a household's vulnerabilities before they ever make a move. The stillness in the Guthrie home that evening was the heavy quiet that always precedes a sudden, violent rupture. Every shadow in the hallway likely concealed a voyeur who had mastered the art of remaining completely unseen. The assailant didn't just target Nancy. They exploited the confusion her family's presence would inevitably stir within the law. We are left with the metallic remains of a tragedy and a question that continues to haunt the file. Why is the car still there? We refuse to flatten the facts just to make a theory sound cleaner. Multiple reasons exist for the delay, and they do not all point toward a single easy conclusion. We start with the mechanical record, because it is documented and holds a necessary place in this history. Enton noted that forensic data extraction caused a total failure in the CRV's onboard electronics during the sweep. That fault required specialized repair work at a local mechanic before the vehicle could be returned to the family. Part of the 66-day timeline is simply this. It is a technical reality, not a grand conspiracy. It was a repair necessitated by the investigation, alongside the bureaucratic weight Krieger admitted was present. A federal vehicle examination is a slow process where chain of custody requirements move with a glacial heavy pace. Joint efforts between the PCSD and the FBI add procedural mass to every tactical decision. 66 days is within the normal range for an investigation of this complexity, as Krieger stated very clearly. Then there is the third explanation, found in the specific language Krieger used to describe their current legal goals. The mission is to build a case so absolute it leaves zero doubt in the mind of a jury. Maintaining a flawless chain of custody isn't for the detectives, it is for the 12 people in the box. You don't mention a jury when you are talking about simple paperwork or basic administrative delays. The word jury is only used when evidence is being meticulously preserved for a future criminal trial. It means investigators are looking past the initial arrest and toward the final high-stakes moment of a conviction. They are preparing for the room where 12 citizens will weigh the state's evidence against a cold-blooded killer. The blue Honda CRV is being held under strict protocol as if it were a star witness. That is the framework Krieger described, leading us to the question that defines this entire investigation. If GPS data clears Tommaso Cioni definitively, then the car's primary value is no longer about guilt. Its most vital content is not a smoking gun, but a total, undeniable exoneration of the innocent. That clearing of a name is critical for the family and for the eventual prosecution of Nancy's true abductor. In a courtroom, a skilled defense attorney will hunt for any pocket of doubt they can possibly weaponize. They would target the son-in-law, the garage timeline, and the last person documented at the scene. That argument remains a threat until the GPS record, secured by a perfect chain of custody, kills it. Those logs, extracted by professionals and confirmed by the department, shut that door for the defense permanently. The CRV in that Pima County shop may be the document that makes the coming prosecution unstoppable. It eliminates the distractions, leaving the federal investigation to focus solely on the person who actually took her. DNA profiles, digital footprints, lens captures, vehicle telemetry, and subpoenaed communications from the investigation's very start. Detectives isolated 3 specific dates deemed highly significant in the weeks leading up to the crime. January 11th stands as a critical marker flagged by Google's own internal back-end data. January 24th surfaced after Brian Enton confirmed FBI agents were canvassing the victim's local neighborhood. Then came January 31st, the night the pattern solidified and the formal hunt began. Grainy lenses captured a masked, armed figure stalking Nancy's doorstep in the pre-dawn hours of February 1st. Forensic specialists confirmed Nancy's blood was present on her own front porch. At exactly 2:28 a.m., her pacemaker application severed its digital pulse and remains silent. A single vehicle remains impounded at a Tucson shop, held under the strict chain of custody of Pima County sheriffs. Krieger stated the objective is zero doubt. The evidence must be absolutely rock solid. That blue Honda CRV is not a mystery. It is a vital chapter investigators have already scrutinized in secrecy. They are shielding that evidence until the moment a jury finally needs to see it. 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie vanished February 1st. Her family refuses any use of past tense. Months pass, yet her daughter Savannah still speaks of her mother as being present. Savannah's 7-word response silenced the country. She is still in the present tense to me. While the car sits in Tucson, the investigation moves, and Nancy Guthrie is still waiting for the answers. This continued presence indicates a clinical depth of focus rarely encountered among those skimming through superficial noise. Exonerating evidence is just as powerful as the proof used to convict a killer. A vehicle's GPS record is never a footnote. It is the case's structural foundation. Google data pointing to a Saturday 3 weeks prior is no coincidence. It's a thread. In a case this calculated, these thin threads are eventually the only thing that matters. Others still navigate this tragedy while relying on fractured data and dangerous, incomplete narrative fragments in the shadows. The January 11th Google connection, the electronic destruction, and the line between incrimination and exoneration. These are not minor details. Those in your circle deserve to witness a case of such immense importance without relying on flawed fragments. Precise information ensures no one suffers this fate without a clear trail to follow. The integrity of this investigative framework depends on those who demand scrutiny far beyond the public record. Building this forensic archive requires a sustained commitment of time and investigative resources. Enhanced access provides the raw psychological profiles and discarded leads that never reach the final, sanitized summary. Sustaining this relentless pursuit of the truth ensures that the next phase of the investigation proceeds without any external interference or institutional delays. The next development in this case is inevitable and will not wait. Nancy Guthrie deserves a definitive answer, and this pursuit resumes the precise second the official record moves forward.